through, creating partnerships with your procurement team is, of course, good, right? You want to get the best possible deal and the best possible rate. But you need to do them a favor once the deal is in motion. You only get maybe one chance or two chances to make those kinds of policy sort of decisions. I think if you're going to destroy resources in production, it needs to be very well communicated. It shouldn't be emotional.
Welcome to FinOps in Action. I'm your host, Alon Arvatz. Each week, I'll sit down with FinOps experts to explore the toughest challenges between FinOps and engineering. This show is brought to you by Point5, empowering teams to optimize cloud costs with deep detection and remediation tools that drive action. Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of FinOps in Action. Today, I'm particularly intrigued and excited towards the discussion with today's guest. He actually started as an engineer, moved to IT finance, and eventually found peace at FinOps. He started at a big financial services enterprise and moved to a fast-growing tech company. On the first 4 months of his role, he saved over $1 million on AWS costs and achieved over 99% tagging compliance. Who can say that about himself? I'm happy to welcome Senior FinOps Engineer at DataRobot, Tim Nolan. Tim, how are you today?
Thank you, Alon. I'm doing good. Appreciate that warm introduction for my first ever podcast.
Yes, it's great to see you. And please share with us, Tim, what was the one thing you got wrong when you started your FinOps career?
So great question. I think the TLDR there is, everyone wants to use less cloud and focus on your usage optimization. I think I probably didn't pay enough attention to paying less, right? This idea of rate optimization and that whole sort of side of vendor negotiations, your cloud commitments. And if I can go back in time, I would have probably spent a little bit more time brushing up on my vendor negotiation skills and partnership with procurement and finance, which I'd love to dive into in this podcast because it's an exciting topic for me. So
That's actually very interesting because I think most of the FinOps people will say, hey, we started with cost visibility and then we moved to commitments. But sounds like your intuition was to focus in the beginning, at least, on usage optimization. Is that because of your engineering background?
absolutely, right. So I'm kind of born and bred. I started out my career as kind of a Linux engineer, and you always want to, at least I've always wanted to, as an engineer, build solutions that are not only resilient but efficient and can run as efficiently as possible. And when the companies I've worked for have kind of migrated to the cloud, you want to pay as little as possible. That's natural. I'll say, like, my disclaimer on this podcast is that your mileage may vary, and everyone is at different stages. Our companies are at different stages of their FinOps journey, and that's okay. And so, from my perspective, using less cloud and optimizing your usage is, of course, important, and that's great. I've listened to other guests on your podcast, and I just wanted to take a little bit of a fun turn and maybe talk about more of the rate side of things. So
That's actually, that's fascinating. I think there's a lot of sense in starting from usage optimization because you don't want to commit to waste. On the other hand, sounds like you were on a journey of moving from what is more interesting to you, what you felt that you can make I don't know, you can use your background to make an impact, to a perspective of, hey, let's focus on where I can make more impact. This is what's important.
yeah, absolutely. I'll never forget. At my previous company, I underwent a really cool training, and it was conducted and facilitated by our procurement leader at the time, who taught how sales and sellers will typically interact with technology teams. And so that was a very impactful experience for me in my career moving forward. And you kind of get to understand, and I hope I'm not offending any of the sales folks that I've worked with, and they're great. And I also could talk the the positives, but they have deals to make and their own, kind of revenue commitments. So I think that whole side of engineering you tend to work with your finance counterparts. Maybe you're working on a forecast or the number of licenses that your tool you're responsible for has, and the process sort of stops there, and then finance and procurement take over. Whereas in FinOps and cloud, especially, I think that engineers should play more of take more of a front seat with commitment tracking, with forecast tracking, and with renewals. So I'll start there. I kind of have like three sort of tips, I would say, when it comes to um, cloud commitment renewals. I'm will hopefully be going on my fourth AWS renewal in the next 12 months. So I feel like I've been in, each renewal I've learned something new. And the first piece is to own your forecasts, right? Own your run rate. I think one of the things that the cloud providers will try to dictate is past performance or past cost history will dictate your company's future run rate. And it's easy to get a little defensive about that. As someone who is in FinOps, you want to think that your run rate is going to go down over time, but you really should do your market research, figure out kind of try to use your contacts and the FinOps Foundation on how the cloud providers will try to structure the commitments. And I think a lot of that is, AWS, for example, will likely take your trailing 6 months of cost history, double it, and use that as a starting point and say, here's kind of the starting point for your commitment, where you really, as it's your organization, right? You need to be a little bit more forthright and say, no, actually, like we're going on this different trajectory, AWS, like we need to start the conversations there. So I'll kind of pause there and see how that.
So the first tip, own your forecasting. How do you do that? Is that through discussion with engineers? Is that through discussion with leadership to understand if there are new products planned? How do you do that?
Yeah, it's with both. I'll say one of the mistakes I've made in the past is focusing too much on the conversations with engineers and less on, because frankly, I worked at a big company in my previous role, and my company now is pretty, lean by comparison and much smaller. It's understanding your company's direction. That kind of sounds obvious, but there could be strategic things that are happening that might be above your pay grade that you kind of have to dig into and understand that strategic company decisions could impact, obviously, your cloud run rate. That could be an acquisition, that could be a deprecation of a major technology. All these things need to be factored in. And I think a lot of the times the FinOps lifecycle and usage optimization is all great, but sometimes it's the stroke of the pen that can have the biggest impacts, that will usually last the most amount of time, right? Because commitments can be 3 to 5 years plus.
Yeah. So on the forecast, don't let the cloud providers dictate how much to commit. What are the other tips you have for us?
I would say just understand and understand kind of where sellers are coming from. I say sellers, I mean the salespeople. Understand the tactics might be a strong word, but just the strategies that they have, such as maybe citing your manager's manager, and making it kind of seem like it's your leadership's priority, using urgency and kind of time as a tactic. They may want to delay and engage late to kind of create that sense of urgency. I think what I found, and look, I'm not the world's best negotiator, is help your procurement team help you, right? That would be my tip, is understand that if you kind of understand how the deal mechanics works, but you don't want to maybe take a front seat in negotiation, have your procurement team maybe handle some of the more difficult conversations if you're not comfortable with that, and educate your procurement team. Educate them about the run rate, why it changes, what you can do to affect it. Cite efficiency projects. Our company now has a lot of efficiency projects underway. we want to prioritize them, right? And get our run rate to a point where when our next renewal comes, we can kind of use that as a, a springboard to hopefully have a more competitive, lower, leaner commitment going forward.
That's really fascinating. And you actually open my mind to other skills and knowledge that finance people need to have that is not discussed. So I hear a lot about technical knowledge that you need to have around cloud, around other cloud technologies. I hear about managing stakeholders within the organization. We hear a lot about reporting, optimization. We don't hear a lot about, hey, you need to understand sales. You need to be a good negotiator. So it's a whole set of skills that you need to have on top of what everyone's talking about.
Sure, and I think it's probably complementing the technical acumen with some of the vendor management skills. Um, One of the things, if we you open the podcast by saying tagging hygiene and tagging compliance, and that's becoming a renewed hot topic at my company right now with respect to Kubernetes cost allocation. And where that relates to what we just talked about is a lot of times um, your non-cloud software, right? Those renewals and those deals start to become more essential to FinOps because you might be running, for example, security tooling that runs in Kubernetes, and it runs as a daemon set, and it runs on all of your nodes. And that particular workload is counted by number of agents, right? For example. So therefore, the efficiency projects that you work on and um, the number of nodes that you have running is really the one metric that the cloud bill cares about, right? It's your compute hours, and to the extent that you can optimize that, you of course optimize your cloud costs, but you then kind of have these downstream optimizations with your friends, and if you work in engineering, your friends in security, your friends in shared enterprise services like observability and other kind of services that your whole company will consume. So you can be an asset and a good friend to your to folks like in those kind of cousin roles like SRE, security, observability, and you can help their uh, optimization projects as well.
That's awesome. And I actually want to talk to you about Kubernetes and tagging, especially with the success you had. But maybe for that, just because I'm really, really curious. So you mentioned the collaboration with procurement and vendor management. I wonder, how do you do that? And more specifically, do you feel like you need to support them with the negotiation, or they are supporting you through a negotiation process?
It's a two-way street. So I think you need to be self-aware of what you're good at from negotiation perspective and what you're not good at. And I've personally found I'm really good at being the good cop. I know that getting through, creating partnerships with your procurement team is of course, good, right? You want to get the best possible deal and the best possible rate, but you need to do them a favor once the deal is in motion, and you start, month one all the way to month 36. You want to be able to continually keep them involved in the forecast and the run rate so they can be better armed, kind of at the next renewal. And just a lot of knowledge sharing. Every procurement team is going to be different. um, Not every procurement person, you're not the only deal that they're working on. They may be working on completely separate software, even non-software deals with lots of legalese and things like that. So just because they're not technically familiar with cloud, do them a favor and spend that extra 5 minutes on a meeting afterward, or just spend more time with them educating on how cloud works, how getting into like high commitments could put your whole savings programs or your optimization programs at risk, because you never want to have to write a check at the end of the contract anyways, even though you brought your run rate down. So communicating those types of vastly important facets of a cloud contract, I think is super helpful.
Yes, and I guess once you realize that you can make such a big impact with negotiation, contracting, you're a lot more open to work with procurement. I'm sure it's making that a lot easier.
Absolutely.
And Tim, okay, we have to talk about the tagging compliance piece because saying 99% is extremely impressive. And I would love to know, and I'm sure our listeners would love to know, what was your journey to get to this point?
Sure. And I'll caveat by saying we've kind of hit the reset button on tagging compliance because um, we've kind of gone from EC2 and traditional cloud resource tagging into Kubernetes labeling and annotation. But rewinding the clock about 3 years ago, I managed a tool called Cloud Custodian, which I know is super popular in the FinOps Foundation community and just generally for good kind of cloud hygiene. And a lot of the byproduct of tagging compliance is you eliminate waste and you achieve a lot of upfront kind of immediate savings. Um, so yeah, we had a tagging as a service, like automation in place in all our AWS accounts, that would take a kind of a business facing document, cloud tagging policy, and move that into code. So you can take the rules that your finance and your marketing and your sales leadership want around how to attribute cost of sale, production costs versus your R&D costs, and you literally move that, into GitHub and into your CI/CD pipelines, and you execute against that tagging policy to improve your hygiene. All is well, right? And then your company moves to Kubernetes, and you realize that all of the cloud resource tagging that you did at the EC2 instance level is sort of I'm not going to say falls on its face, but they're new kind of renewed challenges. Um, so our company, for example, we did mass kind of migration to managed Kubernetes, right, to EKS. Not that we weren't on Kubernetes before, but this is more of the cloud provider, management kind of service. And on top of that, we also decoupled our monolith and moved to more of like a microservices architecture. So now you have teams that manage one or more workloads that now all of a sudden they don't just need a cost center. They need things like a team identifier, right? What is this sub engineering team, and how do I attribute cost to it? So lots of new opportunities and challenges. I'll be the first to admit that we're not perfect. It's nice that it's cyclical, that we kind of the FinOps foundation, the FinOps life cycle is kind of like, I thought I had checked that box of attributing all of your spend to the business units. And now we kind of have to enter that racetrack in that lane again, where we're kind of finding ourselves having to do that again for good reasons. And it's a good opportunity to kind of dust off the tagging policy document and make updates. I'm sure reorganizations within engineering and in the company have scary effects sometimes for things like cost center alignment, tagging policies. So it's all good. It's all positive. That 99% metric, I'm going to have to update on my resume.
Absolutely. And I'm curious, Tim, do you need to enforce tagging in order to reach these achievements?
Yeah. So we traditionally use Cloud Custodian as a non-prod enforcing mechanism where kind of like a three strikes you're out sort of policy where a warning gets sent, whether it's a Slack message or just a log message. The resource gets paused, after a couple days or a week. It's dependent on the policy of the specific resource. And then in non-prod, there could be, like a destructive kind of terminating the resource, especially if it's a costly resource. In only kind of, read-only sort of mode in production, right? That would kind of be managed a little bit more carefully. So yeah, it's enforcing. I think is enforcing with communication, right? Over communicate, especially in a decentralized sort of global community that in company that I work for. It's not always easy to, just grab someone at the water cooler and you're talking to people on the West Coast, you're talking to people in Europe, you're talking to people on the East Coast. So you have to over communicate, especially stuff like that.
For sure. And I'm really curious about the level of friction you're willing to accept with engineers. So, would you shut down a resource in production if it's not tagged for a certain period of time?
No, no, I would not do that. I think maybe that's my bias as an engineer. I think um, security, reliability, resiliency are probably the most important. You want your product to be running. You want it to be delightful to use as a customer and a user. Efficiency is I don't want to say a secondary priority, but it's probably like priority 1A in production, right? Now in non-production, I might take a different stance there, because you really can make the case for like office hours automation and really aggressive kind of node scaling and bin packing, Kubernetes, and all that is great for non-production, but it needs to be very well tested um, for it to go into production, right?
So, I totally get the point of the resiliency and security. I wonder if you also look at it from a perspective of relationship with the engineer organization. Like, if I shut things in production, hey, how would that influence the relationship with engineers or how engineers look at the FinOps team?
Yeah, it could be a very kind of brittle. You only get a maybe one chance or two chances to make those kinds of policy sort of decisions. I think if you're going to destroy resources in production, it needs to be very well communicated. It shouldn't be emotional. It shouldn't be something that you're trying to sort of, prove a point or you're trying to change behavior. I think those things should be dealt with via, let's have a conversation about it. Let's bring in leadership if we have to, that kind of thing. But overall, I think, I've been extremely impressed with all the engineers at my company. Everyone wants to do the right thing, especially, we're not as big as my previous company. So from that perspective, you know, we all understand that the stakes are high and cloud cost optimization literally could mean, extended runway, extended, open positions, right? That could be funded because as you're probably aware, the cloud bill is becoming more and more at the forefront of the IT bill these days. So to the extent you can make, you know, hundreds of thousands of dollars of savings optimizations, you can start to have those, pretty big conversations around, hey, we just saved $1 million in this efficiency project. Now we can fund this other efficiency project. Or hey, engineering team, you know how you've been complaining about you're over resourced and you don't have enough folks to work on this. Like, what if we tackle this efficiency project to sort of open up a new hire for your team to do X, Y, and Z? So approaching things that way, I think, go a long way, especially when you're trying to help the teams help themselves.
That's really amazing. And I wonder how you handle optimization from that perspective. I'm talking about usage optimization more specifically. Sounds like you have kind of a project mode where you take a project, you tackle it, you get the savings, you can do additional stuff with it. So, how is it happening at DataRobot today?
Yeah, that's exactly it. The good news is that we have more efficiency projects than we have people to work on them. Um, so therefore, it gives us a nice backlog of projects to prioritize, to fund, to resource, and I'll be honest, a lot of it is virtual teams, right? So I work, 100% on, we now kind of call it efficiency. It's efficiency projects rather than cloud FinOps projects. A lot of this stuff spans, beyond cloud. So yeah, we use Jira, we use Slack, as far as like communication and workflow. Um, And yeah, we try to fund the projects and sort of plan quarterly and try to bucket people into like weekly, whether they be sprints, doing planning that way or just swarming a project. And this is my opinion. I feel like the more you can get one or two to three engineers to just dedicate themselves and swarm a project from soup to nuts and really, really define the scope. This is what we're going to do, and we know we're done when this metric changes to this state, right? Like using things like OKRs to drive project and progress and limit scope are things that we try to do. And again, we're not perfect. Hopefully, I'm not the only one to say that. So,
And I'm really curious how you scope and prioritize this project. So, do you scope it around a specific inefficiency that you now fixed across all the accounts? Or do you focus on a specific service, or you focus on a specific team and take the top initiatives? How do you look at it?
we try to like take a cross section of cloud costs saved, right? Like what is the savings potential, of course, along with customer value. So, our company, for example, we operate in the cloud. We have a multi-tenant SaaS platform. We also have customers that operate on-prem. So they take DataRobot, they install it in their own, whether it's their own cloud environment or their own kind of private data center environment. And a lot of times efficiency projects will help them, meaning the non-cloud kind of users or the self-managed users. So the more that an efficiency project can affect both, this is why I say a lot of these efficiency projects span outside of cloud, the more that they can help both personas, the better. So if we can reduce this efficiency project will reduce our cloud run rate by 10%, but it'll also help our self-managed customers reduce their hardware footprint by 10%. That really helps with things like renewals and things, just overall delighting our customers and saying, oh, hey, by the way, if you upgrade to our latest version of DataRobot, this is hypothetical, by the way, you can run it on 10% less hardware. Maybe that translates to one or five less servers to run on in their data center or in their AWS cloud environment or whichever cloud environment they're running on. And that tends to have those types of value props, I think, go a long way for our customers. So we have two segments of customers that we need to impress. One is our customers, and my customers tend to be our other engineers and our own kind of engineering leadership. So I'm sort of straddled in the middle there.
Absolutely. And Tim, I think if I'm taking one message for you is focus on where you can have the most impact. So also be efficient on where you're putting your efforts to make sure you focus on the things that make the biggest impact. I think that's something that goes across the board on everything you just shared with us.
Absolutely. You gotta know what you know and know what you don't know, and understand there are other engineering experts out there in your company, and use that for good, right? And be a cheerleader. Make sure to celebrate their wins. I know that's cited a lot.
Absolutely. And Tim, we would also love to learn about you, not only from you. So first of all, you live today at Great Hartford, Connecticut, correct?
Yeah, I'm in the greater Hartford area, so right in the middle of the state.
And are you originally from there?
Yeah. So I grew up in Connecticut, born and raised.
Very nice, very nice. And is there a book or a movie you would like to recommend to us?
Let's see, I actually have it right here.
Oh wow.
So this is, hopefully folks know, this is Google's, how Google runs production systems. This is the SRE book, and by O'Reilly, by the way. I enjoyed it, and I refer back to it every now and then to akin to what we talked about production. Don't turn off resources in production, right? Make sure production is super stable, because I think that a lot of times efficiency projects and the priorities of running more efficiently and more cost conscious conflict with production stability. And so I think I happen to work a lot with our SRE team, and I've grown to appreciate, that production. Obviously, it sounds very obvious, must be stable, must be up, but sometimes you can't bite off those efficiency projects or those savings claims, or can't realize the value of making production more efficient right away, right? Sometimes it takes a lot of tuning, a lot of tweaks, and this book, I'll say, goes into way more detail than I would have thought it would have went into, but it's super useful, so I recommend it.
So if you want to turn off your brain and read something easy, Site Reliability Engineering by O'Reilly.
Yeah, I bring it on vacation and stuff like that. Self-admitted tech nerd.
Okay, that's great. And what do you like to do outside of work for fun?
I guess I call myself a golfer when I'm not busy with my two small kids at home and spending time with my family. That's what I like to do. So I'm hoping one of these days I can make it to the FinOps X conference. Maybe when my kids get a little bit older and have a little bit more flexibility to travel. So
Yeah. And I'm afraid to admit that I've never played golf.
well, we could change that.
Like I played top golf I played, but like real golf in a real field, never. So that's something I should definitely do one day.
There you go.
Maybe on FinOps X next year.
Yeah, nice.
That's great. And Tim, I'm sure a lot of people would love to reach out to you, ask questions, learn more. What is the best way to do that?
Yeah, you can find me on the FinOps Foundation Slack community. So Tim Nolan.
Tim Nolan. That's great. You heard him, guys. Slack, reach out to him and you'll learn a lot of good stuff. I personally learned a lot. I can tell you that besides the focus on impact and being efficient in FinOps operation, I really expand my horizons into what the FinOps roles include. And it's not only cloud and spend and working with internal stakeholders, but also thinking about where you can make more impact when interacting with your cloud providers. And maybe FinOps person needs to be skilled in negotiation and understand sales. So guys, go learn sales and go learn negotiation. It will make you a lot better FinOps people. Tim, thank you very, very much for joining us today.
Thank you very much, Alon.
And I would also like to thank our listeners for joining us once again. I'm sure you had a great time, just as much as I did. Don't forget to follow us and tell your friends. Tim, thank you again. This has been another fascinating, fun episode of FinOps in Action. See you next time. That wraps up another episode of FinOps in Action. Thank you for joining. For show notes and more, please visit finopsinaction.com. This show is brought to you by Point 5, empowering teams to optimize cloud costs with deep detection and remediation tools that drive action.